AIDS, way back. AIDS could take years spreading. And when we ignored it, it spread widely. When we paid attention to it and we had a public health response to it, we were able to contain it. So there's the ones that take years to spread asymptomatically. There's ones that take hours to spread asymptomatically. So you have like SARS and AIDS are the very big extremes. And then probably a little over here is where we have COVID-19, the novel coronavirus that showed up in 2019 in our world. The parts of the world that had gone through very bad Ebola are the ones that are doing best with the least resources to contain COVID-19. For those of you who occasionally may read the New York Times, they had an excellent article about the sub-Saharan African countries' response to COVID-19. It's very well contained there. And the number one reason people will talk about it is they said we kept our Ebola pandemic response in place. We had those resources, we had those protocols, and we were ready because these are countries that lost like 5,000 people in 2 months due to Ebola. But the response to Ebola on a public health level allowed them to contain COVID, prevent it from deeply penetrating their country, and they have some of the best outcomes when it comes to deaths and infections. So when they left their public health infrastructure in place for a pandemic, it allowed them to not just eventually take care of Ebola, but to be prepared to take care of COVID-19 and any other subsequent viral pathogens. So that's one of the big things to remember. When we learn from our history and we build on our history, we can actually make our future better. It helps us make better choices at the moment. So I'm going to dip into a little share screen, Peter.
Yeah.
So one of the big things I do, I love being a family physician. I love being in the room with that one patient, whether it's in the hospital or in the clinic. I love delivering babies and teaching the interns how to do that. I love engaging with people one-on-one, but I also know that so much of what healthcare is was where we live, learn, work, and play has a bigger impact on our healthcare outcomes. So that's why I teach advocacy and policy. And policy right now has been really huge because it's the policies that provide the structure for the lawmakers and for us to respond to things. So we're going to do a little thing. I'm just going to tell a little story. Get ready. Your part's coming up. So share screen. And go over here. Always got to get everything ready. There we go. I've been doing a lot of these presentations lately, so I think I've been getting quicker. So basically, being held captive, it's really interesting because I want you, for those of you who know the history of the word quarantine, don't tell anyone you're sitting with because I want them to be surprised. We're going to talk about that. So basically, like I said, I tell stories. And you guys all remember this happened. It started rolling in January, February, March. March became a very big time. We're going to talk about a couple of things. And one of the things I want you to know is this is your assignment. Go choose one word from the other side of the screen and just write it in the chat box next to your name, and then just press enter. And as you're thinking about that, for some people they're like, well, what is it? Is there something I'm thinking of now? Something, it's like, just choose a word and put it in the chat box. And you'll be able to explain to yourself why. You don't need to explain to anybody else. Okay, so we're gonna do a little timeline. So way back when, March, things were starting. This guy's like, imagine all the closures and cancellations give people a sense of ominousness. It's really an amazing act of social solidarity. We're sacrificing so we can give doctors, nurses, and hospitals a fighting chance. Start from there, and hopefully we can figure out the rest. This is the thing that I wanted to sort of get in. It's like there was this frame of mind. When we asked our Academy, MAFP, Minnesota Academy of Family Physicians, we were one of the first people to ask Governor Walz to shut down the state. And it's because we knew that we did not have the capacity in our health system at that time to take a massive influx of very sick patients. And that if we did a slowdown, a shutdown, a shelter in place, then we would have time to build our systems so that we could be prepared to take care of the people who would need care. But there's a lot of us, and many of us, there's like, that's taking away your freedom, that's locking you down, that's isolating you enough of, so many of us are isolated enough to be in the first place. But very early on, there were a lot of folks who were like, can we shape this in a way that actually helps us work through this together? And this act of quote unquote social solidarity, a group sacrifice. When Peter talked to me, he talked about how you guys are working through Exodus and the plagues and things. And the idea that when we work together and we make rules to help each other, that we can actually get through very challenging times. Quarantine, for those of you who don't do things like spend too much time looking up the history of words, quarantine was basically originally 40 days. It was 40 days when everyone had to stay in place if there was a plague around so that it would decrease the likelihood of spread. We don't like to use the term quarantine anymore because it really seems punitive. We like shelter in place, stay where you are, help each other get through this. And one of the big things I had to come to terms with was people aren't the enemy in this. I wrote this, I'm a big Twitter person, basically because it's how we communicate in policymaking nowadays. But I said, she knows COVID-19 is not the enemy, it's a virus. The enemy is panic, the enemy is despair, the enemy is greed. These are the things I will fight every day with every breath I have, with belief in caring, compassion, courage, and community. Together at a distance, flatten the curve. And this is what we were trying to get out there. It's like, we're not trying to hold anyone hostage. We're trying to help everyone understand we have a purpose to get through this together. This is the hospital floor that I work on primarily. And this was early March, and it basically felt like the calm before the storm. Because back when we were asking all of us, all of you, to hunker down, we had less than 250 cases. I mean, my hospital was very empty at the beginning, but we had to get ready. We didn't have enough PPE, personal protective equipment. We didn't have enough of that for every one of our staff, all of our nurses assistants, all of the people who make the food, all of the people that clean the rooms, much less all of the doctors and all of the respiratory therapists, the people who are at the biggest risk. We didn't have enough equipment, and we had no testing. We had very little capacity to even test people. And so when we were asking folks to shut down, it was at a point where there didn't seem like there were a lot of people getting sick. So folks were like, why should we have to do this? And we're like, please, we can get through this together, but we have to work together. My favorite posting on the internet for months was this. I don't even know where it came from, but it's basically a picture, and it's a picture of a posting. And then the whole world walked inside, shut their doors, and said, we will stop it all, everything, to protect our weaker ones, our sicker ones, our older ones. And nothing in the history of mankind ever felt more like love than this. And I remember very early on, probably second, third week of March seeing this, and it would make me cry every time I read it, because this is exactly what we were asking people to do. And so much of what we had to do was new, all of us. Different ways of working, different ways of interacting. As an essential worker, I would drive to the hospital and there'd be like no one on the road, but everyone's still trying to do their jobs in some various ways and still trying to maintain contact with each other. I always like this, trying to find new ways to do something. Mary, do you accept John as your lawfully wedded husband? If so, press enter. If you do not, press escape. Yeah, there's like, this guy's like, you know, we were watching a lot of stuff on the interwebs, and this guy's like, I watched a TV series a year ago without telling my wife, and now she wants to watch it together, and I don't know how to navigate myself out of this web of lies. Things are very different. And then there's, you know, let's look on the bright side. With this quarantine, I might actually have time to fold on my laundry. Which is surprising because I've never been known to be a neat freak, but somehow during the quarantine, redid my closet. There's good sides to this, folks. We got to keep an eye on the good sides too. But it just went on and on and on. And one of my favorites, someone posted, for those of you who have lost track, today is Blur's Day, the 14th of Mayporley. It just seemed endless. You know, history section, one for every year except for 2020. It's like we're going through a lot. We're actually living through historical times, and everyone remembers that there's apparently a curse that says, may you live in interesting times. And I think now we understand. So some people tried to make fun. In global disaster movies, there's always a scientist who's like, we have to act now or people will die. And some government guy who's like, you're blowing this all out of proportion. And I'm like, no one would really act like that in real life. And he's like, now my apologies to those movies. Still haven't decided where to go to Easter. The living room or the bedroom? This is where we were. And a lot of folks who had school-age children, you're very complicated doing work at home and actually taking care of your kids. You can either have a nice day or you can help your child with your math homework. Can't have both. Homeschooling is going well. 2 students suspended for fighting, 1 teacher fired for drinking on the job. Humor was very important for me, especially in the early times, because this is where I work, and these are people I work with. And this is 2.5 months into our job during the pandemic. And this is literally the first day we had enough masks for everyone in our hospital. And in that time, we had multiple of our phlebotomists, the folks who draw blood from every single patient. We had a couple get actually sick, and we had 1 die from COVID. And that would not have happened if we were able to mask up universally from the first day. Not pleasant lessons. You guys remember that empty hallway I was talking about? This was what it looks like when it's full of patients and we have personal protective equipment at every single door. And this is what's necessary to stop a contagious viral illness that spreads by aerosol droplets. We did not have the ability to do this at the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of people in various parts of our manufacturing system, our government system, our infectious disease and hospital systems had to work together just to get those carts in front of every door that needed it. So finally, this is what I wear when I'm going into a room with a COVID positive pregnant patient whose baby I'm going to deliver. This is just what I wear in my head. Once we get fully into the room, we're gowned and gloved in what we call our blues. I look like a plastic truck, but it's what's necessary to protect me, both me and the rest of my patients. When you're spending 3 hours in a room with a woman who's COVID positive, breathing very heavy, and you get to bring a little miracle into the world, it's still actually very hot and sweaty. But I got to tell you, each delivery I've done is another breath of hope for humanity as far as I'm concerned. And these bags, for a lot of you, you might look at them and you're like, oh, why do they have all their sandwich bags hanging around? The reason we have all these sandwich bags hanging around is because we still don't have enough equipment to dispose of between every patient. Every one of these bags has a name on it, and that person, for me, that person is one of my fellow doctors that I work with. And when I look at these bags, I actually don't even see personal protective equipment. What I actually see is families being protected, wives being protected, husbands being protected, children being protected. Every single bag up there is a wish and a hope that we wore our equipment well that day and we're not taking a dangerous, deadly disease home to our family. Brown bags will never mean the same to me again. So this has been exhausting, and we all know that. We've all been exhausted in some level, and it's not ending. That's honestly the most annoying part. It's not really ending. But one of the things I try to keep in mind, like we were talking about earlier on, it's like there's a lot about hope that can be in our light. But one of the things we have to remember is that hope is a muscle. And like a lot of our muscles during this pandemic, they haven't been worked out very much. I don't know about you, I went from 15,000 steps a day to like 600. So my physical muscles are atrophied. My hope muscle, I really had to be working on. This is my cat. A lot of people call him Sonicat because he appears on my Instagram a lot. And I always talk about as he's a very wise cat. Feelings are like fire. They can either warm or burn you. Yours is the choice. Caring, compassion, courage, and kindness are the fires that ignite each other. One candle's fire can light 10,000 and never lose its glow. Wood burns itself when it burns another. So now we choose. We don't fight evil by doing less evil. We fight evil by doing more good. Or as someone has said even better than me, Martin Luther King Jr. This is at the MLK Jr Monument in DC. I took my son there when he was about 7 or 8. I was like, hey, Amos, go get up there so I can take a picture. And he ran up there, and as I took the picture, I realized where he stood. Because this is one of my favorite quotes in the history of the world, because it helps me every day when I see humanity at both its best and worst. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And the fact that he went and stood under only love just has always made me very happy. So that's my little guy when he was little. It's always been a very big part of my hope. This is him now. I just visited him in Montana in July, and he's almost 13. Yeah, Peter, he's that big. And we found new ways to engage, new ways to have fun. We found new ways to laugh and smile at a social distance from other people. And we found new ways to engage in our lives now. A lot of us have found humor online. When your son is going through a phase. I see some of you have had this child. This is one of my favorites. When you're telling your grandparents about your job, they have no clue what you're talking about, but they're very supportive. That supportive face. This is very much about me during the pandemic. Gained a little weight, still cute with a good personality. It's like we've made each other laugh at a distance. We're supporting each other at difference. And there's also opportunity for differences, new things to happen, innovation. I like this guy. He's like, let's be honest, 2020 is the perfect year to get rid of daylight savings time. Just rip it off while we're home and confused. No one will know. It's a thought. There's actually a lot of good innovation that may be coming out of this. One of the things that we've talked about is healthcare has changed more in the last 6 months than it has in the last 10 years. And there's going to be some really good things that we keep from this. It's a horrifying, terrifying time, but we've got to also see what we can come forth and move forward that's been good, so that all these sacrifices have not been in vain. We have to learn about love in lots of different ways, how we express it. This is one of my favorite expressions of love. How much do you love me? So much. On a scale from 0 to burgers. Burgers with bacon. You're the one. So, second part, just real brief. One of the other things I do is about discussing culture of quality care in medicine. One of the things we talk about is the blunt end and the sharp end. And the blunt end is all the stuff that goes into the moment that someone makes a decision. So we talk about the structure of the clinic or the health system, the policies and protocols, the different work processes, the technological environment, the culture of the organization. All of this goes from the blunt end down to basically the sharp end. And the sharp end comes down to the individual. And the individual is one that makes the choices. You can have the best blunt end in the world, but if the person at that sharp end decides, they're the one that decides to make that choice. And so when I talk to you about kindness and courage and compassion and caring, there's a really big reason that I bring that up. Because I should probably, we have to present at the beginning of academic discussions if we have any influences, impacts, or biases. I was raised Catholic, and now I'm a practicing Buddhist. And one of the things in the practice that I practice is the idea that each moment, each second is 3,000 realms of choices. There's 3,000 realms of choices, but our free will is the one that chooses the next step. And so the way I've always thought about it is the universe, the source, the God provides all the blunt end, provides the structure, provides the matter, provides the atmosphere. Every single moment that we're in is the result of every single moment that has come before us. But right at that sharp end, that's when we choose the next realm. That's when we choose the next universe that we live in. This moment right now, it's perfect. It's the perfect result of every single choice that's come before it. But this second, this moment, my next choice shapes the entire universe to come. And that's, to me, the idea of sort of God and humans co-creating our reality together. And it's still perfect, and it's still free will. But where we are right now, we can look at all the structures and all the protocols and all the public health things and everything that's been set up for us. And we can look at the people who are willing to wear masks, and we're looking at the people who are not willing to wear masks. But we individually still get to decide what our future world is. You're the sharp end, I'm the sharp end. And for me, one of the things that I always talk about is that this moment is perfect, but it's incomplete. And we help to make the next choice of the next world we live in. One of the stories I posted that I'd like to read to you sort of explains how I feel about these things. posted it on my Facebook. It got some good responses, but the biggest reason I posted it is because sometimes you just have to get things out of your mind. So it goes like this. This is from early August. Very often when I'm walking around the hospital, I make a point of saying hello to everybody because I want to live in a place where people say hello to each other. Red Lodge, Montana taught me that. A lot of times folks ask me how I'm doing, and I just say, I'm living the dream. And some folks will laugh along with me, and some folks will laugh and say, it's a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? I usually say something like, it's what we got and it's what we do. Basically, I say it's nonsense. But every time there's a place in my heart where I understand. Sometimes it does feel like it's a nightmare. On days like this, especially days like this when it feels so normal, everything looks so beautiful, I wonder, how can a nightmare look so normal? When I was younger, I used to have a lot of nightmares, until somewhere I read that if you're in a nightmare, you need to face the monster. You need to run to the monster, stand before it, look it right in its eyes, and step into it. Because what you realize is that all parts of the dream are you. Facing yourself is a critical point in controlling your path in the dream. I know this is not a dream. I also know that it does sometimes feel like we're living in a nightmare, just beyond our control, because others are not doing the right thing, and they are prolonging our nightmare. We have to find a way to control our path. We have to figure out what that monster really is, what it is inside of us that we can change. As I've said before, the virus is not the enemy. The enemy is fear. The enemy is greed. The enemy is selfishness. I think we have to face our fear that we have no control, and this nightmare that it's in someone else's hands. It's not in someone else's hands. It's in each one of our hands. People are using division, hateful speech, schadenfreude, ad hominem attacks, and anger to sow fear among us for their own desire for power. Their efforts are ripping us apart and prolonging this nightmare and hijacking our dreams. What can one person do? One person can be the ripple that starts the wave. Today and every day, face that personal monster. We don't have to run from it, and we don't have to become it. We overcome it. We overcome it when we face fears with acts of compassion, kindness, caring, and courage. I specifically say actions. When we act, there are consequences, and each of those consequences provides opportunities for new actions. Actions are how we build the path and walk the path that gets us through this. We can either stay frightened and controlled by our own personal nightmare, or we can choose to wake up each day and act in a way that's going to bring more compassion, kindness, caring, and courage into our world. Every act of kindness counts. It doesn't have to be big things. It can be everyday run-of-the-mill acts. It can be an easy act of compassion, thanking the clerk at the retail store and the grocery store, tipping the folks who bring you dinner to the curb, appreciating each other with a thumbs up as you pass each other on the trail. We know very courageous people who are the only ones in their neighborhood store wearing a mask. We know people that are standing and marching with masks in protest as often as they can to make sure normalizing the dismantling of structural racism is one of the changes that arises from this nightmare. We know people that are doing everything in their power to get our citizens informed about their rights and their ability to vote in November. Each small effort, every kindness, every act of compassion, every act of caring, every act of courage allows us to face our monster. And when we refuse to become the monsters, that is when we change the nightmare into our dream, a dream of a brighter tomorrow, brought about by the choices that we make today, a dream in which we all get through this together because of the path we've built together. That dream can start today, and it must be renewed every day. And as we take these actions and make these choices, our dreams will become our reality. We will leave this nightmare behind, and the next normal will be a kinder place. Can we do this? I believe we can. I will start today. I will start now. And I'll see you on the other side. So, like I said, I tell stories. Some of them are long, some of them are short. But the biggest thing that I've come to understand is that when we're able to work together, when we're able to form community, we're able to come through our questions with a common purpose. And one of the biggest common purposes we have now is how can we create a society that can get through this together? It's going to be challenging. And we've already been exhausted. So how do we renew it? We take all that blunt end and we just remember that that sharp end is where we make our decision. And I ask myself, is this choice kind? Is it compassionate? Is it caring? Is it courageous? And I tell you what, that actually runs perfectly along the line with public health. So when we make choices to protect each other, we protect ourselves. And we make choices to be kind to each other, we protect ourselves and our families and our communities. So it's not the most statistics-filled public health talk, but it's the one that I teach my learners at every level of medical education. It's ones that we try to get across to the policyholders. Is the only way out is through, and the only way through is together, and we can do this. So I'll open up for questions.
Dr. Crichlow, thank you for that reflection, deeply powerful, and there's a lot to chew on there. I think to begin, it's tempting to want to armchair quarterback the last 6 months, right? And to say, oh, if only we had done X, or if only we had done Y. I think in response to what you're saying, I think the orientation needs to be more forward focused, right? So where do we go from here? And so with that in mind, a question about public. There's a lot of conversation around if only we had a coordinated national response to this, or a more robust coordinated national response to this. My question to you is, as a practitioner, do you A, agree, and B, what would that look like? What would a more coordinated or more robust public health response look like for us going forward?
Yeah, and I like the idea of this moment forward. It's more helpful. Mm-hmm. First, I want to wave hi to Dave Olson's parents. Here you go. So Dr. Dave Olson, one of my colleagues and also one of the Viking family medicine docs, we're very proud of him. Good job. You guys did good work.
That's Gary and Jean, his parents. Yep.
There you go. So what would a coordinated public health response look like? As I said, one of the things we can do is we can look at, when we look back, let's look at what's worked, and let's look at the countries that have actually moved forward. Honestly, I think a perfect example of what might be helpful for us is Italy. Because right as things were ramping up very early on, Italy just got the worst of the worst. And a lot of it was because they didn't have the information. When I saw the hospitals there during the height of their pandemic, multiple people in the same room, patients not isolated, providers not with any personal protective equipment. And it was all because they got caught in that wave. They get caught in a wave where all the patients showed up very sick at the same time, and it catastrophically affected their infrastructure. What came out of that, though, was the fact that when stuff started hitting New York, first it looked like Italy. It was like just cacophony. Patients everywhere, providers without inappropriate equipment, but they learned from the early on missteps of other health systems, And New York went through both Italy and post-Italy. New York came through some of the biggest changes. And one of the hugest things that they did was ramping up their ability to isolate people appropriately, having social distancing and only essential workers in public for a very long time, but getting to the point where they were able to let their health system catch up. I have a lot of friends and colleagues that worked the very front lines, and they're the same people. Like when this started out, there were refrigerator trucks picking up the dead bodies. That was so much. And instead of running and doing the same thing over and over again, they started working on what was possible. And one of the things that we've done in many hospital systems, we have floors that have no COVID patients, no COVID positive patients. We have floors that have only COVID positive patients, and staff on those floors don't go to other floors. And even simple things like that drops the mortality rate. The fact that we were able to put mask and PPE on every staff member, critical. Couldn't happen in Italy when they first got overwhelmed. Couldn't happen in New York when they first got overwhelmed. We're at a point now where we have so much community spread in lots of different places that I'm concerned that one of the things that we may have to do is, as November, December come, we might have to go for another round of sheltering in place. But we have to prepare to do it better this time. We have to prepare in ways where people aren't isolated, they're sheltered. We have to do it in a way where people feel supported and not trapped. We have to put it in a way that people understand that, hey, if we can, there's speculation that if we could do a serious 4-week, hardcore, high volume testing, shelter in place lockdown, and serious contact tracing, that we could halt this. There's perspectives from 4 to 8 weeks of really aggressively doing those 3 things. One of the things that we can do just now is honestly, just let's not argue about masks. Just put them on. Because we know it doesn't hurt, and we know it can help. If we have 80% of the population masked, that seriously slows the virus. If we have 90% of the population masked, that cuts it off in its tracks. Our organization at Minnesota Academy of Family Physicians, we actually...
Masks spread love is what it says. Yeah. Well, to that point, I think the world knows that our president has contracted and is COVID positive and is now being cared for in the hospital. And certainly, this is not a political discussion necessarily about that, but how do, maybe the question I want to ask is, do you think that how will this reality that this public leader who was undeniably dismissive of masking and a lot of the sort of general basic protocols that have been encouraged by physicians such as yourself, now that he is sort of experiencing some consequences of contracting the virus and those around him and so forth and so on. What's your expectation? Do you think that people will respond more positively now to this call to stay masked and to remain socially distant and those types of things?
It's one of those situations where, number one, I am wishing a speedy and healthy recovery, because I've taken care of quite a few patients and actually have a few friends who have had COVID-19, and some of them have had very bad long-term outcomes. Healthy young people who now have basically COVID cardiomyopathy. They'll never have the strength that they used to have. There's more than just mortality is part of the consequence of this. What do I think? I think it really responds to, it's like I said, I think it's that sharp end. I think it's how every single one of us responds. I am very, very sorry that anyone has contracted this illness, where over 200,000 Americans have died. I would love for this to be an opportunity for us to come together as a country and be like, hey, you know, let's put politics aside. Let's just take care of each other. Let's get through this. And I can't make anyone else feel like that, but I can express that every day that I work in the world. I'm like, when I look at a patient, I don't know what their political orientation is. I know they're human, and every human gets love from me unconditionally, and including humans that live in the White House right now. So let's do that. Let's find our purpose. And sometimes you can't change people's mind, but you can model very good behavior. It's like, I care about you. I care about you, President Trump. That's why I'm wearing this mask. Mm-hmm. I care about you, my neighbors in Robbinsdale. That's why I'm wearing this mask. And if you don't want to wear a mask, you know what? When you show up in the hospital, I'll still take care of you. I will put myself and my staff's life at risk to take care of you. We wear masks sometimes 12 to 24 hours a day. And there's people who won't wear it for 20 minutes to go into the store. But you know what? I still love them. And if they come to my hospital, my whole staff will risk their life to take care of them.
Yeah, I think it's important and I think you're echoing this point so wonderfully, is that we, as much as we feel affected and conflicted and held captive by COVID, yep, we still have agency. We still have capacity to respond. And so you've lifted up a number of ways in which we maintain our agency even in the midst of this. There are, anyway, so another question that came in earlier was around, what do we know? And we know that the president is receiving some therapeutic treatment right now, but what do we know about the sort of capacity for these therapeutics and their efficacy, I guess? What should we be anticipating going forward around that? And then secondly, can you speak to the vaccine development and what realistically can we, the everyday person here in Roseville, Minnesota, anticipate around vaccine?
Okay, so the first part, the treatments, the therapeutics, so the medications that we have right now, there's not broad scale data on positive efficacy for any of them. I'm going to be really honest. There's small scale data on some of the antivirals. There's small scale data on some of the steroids. Where we've really improved is in how we are physically caring for the patients. Our patients will come in, and back in the day, it was like, you know, you waited till their oxygen saturation in their blood was super low, then you threw them on a ventilator, and then you fought for their life. We have some different ways of protocols of dealing with. One of our biggest one is actually having the patient prone. So having the patient as much time as possible on lying on their stomach as opposed to on their back, because it provides better oxygenation. And a lot of those folks, we don't even have to get them to the ventilator. So even that bizarrely simple task that is, you know, primarily nursing has changed the morbidity and mortality outcomes. But the medications that we give and the antibody therapy that we give, it's all very small scale on whether or not it can have a larger impact. And so I don't try to be overly optimistic or overly pessimistic. I just tell people that all of these things, they take time. And, you know, I've seen every end of the world pathogen virus movie on the planet, and they can get a treatment and a vaccine within 90 minutes. And I'm like, oh, we could be so much better. Reality doesn't work like that. And I wish it did. I really wish it did. The biggest thing is this, is we got to buy time. We got to keep each other as healthy as possible while we can. The vaccine, as a coronavirus, I got to tell you, we're depending on a massive leap in knowledge and technology. We've never been able to make a coronavirus vaccine before. That being said, we've never had the incentive like we have now.
Hmm.
And seriously, there are many new approaches to making vaccines. I mean, way back in the day, Johannes Salk in a laboratory for 15 years, finally got polio vaccine. Great. And we don't have 15 years for this one, but we also have much more technology. But I don't think it happens in a year. And I honestly, for myself, for my family, for my patients, I would be concerned about a rushed vaccine. So that's my biggest thing is I'd be concerned about rushing a vaccine. I really want us to be out of COVID. I want to hug my patients again. I want to go watch my son play soccer. A vaccine that came out this early would very much concern me about its long-term actual efficacy and safety. So I think a heightened sense of awareness tied with a little smear of optimism and a whole lot of faith and prayers, honestly. I know we can get there. We're not going to get there quickly, though.
So a self-interested question for this community of faith is when we gather, our primary expression of our community is to gather together in worship. That holds such a central place in our community's identity, and we've had to adapt. We've had to learn how to be the church in very different ways. At the same time, we continue to hold on to that expression and that expectation that the day will come when we can return together. I am not going to ask you when that day will be, as much as, and unless you happen to have that answer, feel free to share it. But maybe my question more is, when we gather together in the future, what will be different? Meaning, you said earlier in your presentation that we're learning things. We've learned more in the last 6 months than we did, have in the last 10 years. Is corporate gathering one of those places where we're learning something about how we're going to have to do it in the future? And so that's, and this is a self-interested question, like I said, because I'm also hoping to prepare this community for new realities going forward as well.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest things is, I'm Generation X. I grew up between the boomers and the millennials. And then being in training in medicine under the boomers, we did things that weren't that smart. Like, you wanted to tough it out as a doctor. If you were sick, you still went to work. I mean, you were frowned on if you were, if in any way if you took a sick day when I was training, they'd be like, "Are you sure you want to be a doctor?" But that being said, now the millennials have taught us how to take sick days. But the COVID has taught us the necessity of not going out when you feel ill. The necessity of calling people and saying, "I don't feel well. Can you drop off my groceries today? Check in on me tonight." One of the biggest things for public gatherings is no one goes if they felt ill or they've been exposed to someone else. Do not go. Just don't. It's like taking a loaded gun without the safety and just throwing it on the floor in the middle of your gathering. That's where we are when it comes to stay home if you feel sick or you've been exposed to someone sick. The other big thing is during this time, we have our youth group, The Ladder. We haven't been able to meet since February, which was a great meeting, but and kids are keep calling us, "When can we meet again?" It's like the earliest we're going to be able to gather, because we're very physically interactive. The earliest we are saying that we're going to be able to gather is maybe April, because it's a hugely physically interactive meeting that we have, and it's for 2.5 hours. So when I think of like religious gatherings, there's a couple things that we've noted because of some choices other people have made. Singing for a long time in close proximity is one of the biggest ways to spread. Indoors. These outdoor gatherings, we haven't had that kind of spread from. Outdoor gatherings that preserve distance and masking have a limited number. It's like, you know, you're not going to have the 1,400 people mega church, Peter. It's not going to happen.
Darn.
But, you know, small gatherings, social distanced with, you know, not physical interacting. And, you know, and I love I love song, but song involves a lot of deep inhales and deep exhales. Yeah, there you go. That guy knows. So it's really going to be about, you know, maybe you have an outdoor event. Yeah, no, you're Minnesotans. You could do it for a long time. You're tough people. But maybe if you have a song, it's one person and they're singing towards God as opposed to towards the rest of the congregation. And I got to tell you, drive-in movies have made a comeback.
For sure.
But yeah, I think the biggest thing is making sure you don't go if you're ill or been exposed to ill people. Limiting the amount of time out indoors, limiting the space between people, and just really considering other people and considering the health of your community as a valuable purpose for existence.
Well, thank you. I want to be sensitive to the clock. We've already gone a little longer than we typically promise. And so I know that there is so much more we could ask you. But we're grateful for all that you've shared today. And particularly in the care that you provide to the community through North Memorial Hospital, through the University of Minnesota, through the organizations that you serve here in not only in the Twin Cities, but we know that your work carries much further than that. And the students that you work with, what a gift you are to this world, and we're grateful, and how God is working through you, Renee, and this is a demonstration of that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your compassion, your courage, your kindness, and what was the last one? Your
courage, kindness, compassion, and caring.
Caring, yeah, well, for sure, you know, and so we're grateful for that, and we will do our best to carry that message out into the world as well. Grateful to all of you for joining in today. Please wave your hands for Dr. Crichlow in thanks and witness to her powerful work today. And so,
thank you guys so much. You're doing it yourselves every day. You're the sharp end. Lots of love.
Thank you. Thank you for being together today.
Be well.